This is the sixth lesson of the transforming system. And tonight I'll be talking to you about how to take a personal inventory and what that inventory means, about forgiveness, and about how to use the transforming system in a specific area or need in your life so that you can experience the miracle of transformation both in yourself and in your objective, visible world. You know Napoleon Hill as the man who wrote the best-selling book, Think and Grow Rich. Shortly after Napoleon Hill was graduated from college, he was given an assignment. That assignment was to interview the 500 most successful people of that time. This was more than 50 years ago. To determine, if possible, if the principles of success were definable. What is it that makes certain men and certain women more successful than other persons? And successful, by definition, would not just mean achieving or acquiring more of the world's goods than other persons do. Success would have to have a definition broader than just the acquisition of wealth. Success would mean to live happy lives, meaningful lives. It would have to mean that a person was no longer the victim of circumstances, conditions of the past or of the present. A successful person would be someone who had a reasonable measure or degree of control over themselves and over their affairs. An assignment that started out to be a year or two, lasted for 20 years. Napoleon Hill did discover that the principles of success are definable, that success principles can be categorized and taught, that any person who lives on this planet can learn how to become a successful person by their own definition of success. And Mr. Hill was absolutely enthralled when this reality began to be apparent to him, because he assumed that in time, when his work was completed, that he would be able to take the system of success to the world, and the world would receive it enthusiastically with open arms, because surely men and women all over the earth would like to know how they as individuals and as groups could bring about dramatic changes in their lives. And Napoleon Hill was disillusioned in time to discover that not so, that the system of success was not all that readily or well received in that day or in this day or time. Listen to what Napoleon Hill said at one point. You have absolute control over but one thing, and that is your thoughts. This is the most significant and inspiring of all facts known to man. It reflects man's divine nature. This divine prerogative is the sole means by which you may control your own destiny. If you fail to control your own mind, you may be sure you will control nothing else. If you must be careless with your possessions, let it be in connection with material things. Your mind is your spiritual estate. Protect and use it with the care to which divine royalty is entitled. You were given a willpower for this purpose. Powerful word. And if what he said is true, then this means that every person has the same potential of the greatest of us, of the most successful ones of us. And I believe it to be true. William James, who is considered to be the father of American psychology, said at the turn of the century, human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspect of their lives. It's what Napoleon Hill had discovered. And he had interviewed persons who had taken charge of their lives by taking charge of their minds. Watching their outer circumstances then conform to the inner state of their beingness. Tonight I'm going to be talking to you about personal inventory, because how can you and I take charge of our minds until we begin to see what's happening inside us in the heretofore secret or unexamined world of our mind? Was it Plato who said the unexamined life is not worth living? It's true, the unexamined life. And you know the last thing that you and I, as human beings, can ever see? You know what it is? Ourselves. We cannot see ourselves because the five senses that our intellect is connected with is by its very operational nature designed to see away from us. We're always looking and seeing away from us. We don't even smell ourselves, do we? We don't hear ourselves. We don't see ourselves. But we're always seeing and hearing and smelling other people, both literally and figuratively. William Shakespeare said, of all knowledge, the wise and good seek most to know themselves. And so an inventory is a personal fact-finding and fact-facing journey inside your own mind. An inventory is the beginning of a new way of life and will help us to move swiftly and directly towards self-awareness and a more realistic self-image. The more diminished a person's self-image or self-esteem is, the greater is their inability to see themselves or to examine themselves. And therefore, we cannot change what we cannot see. If we do not know that certain things exist, we are powerless to act the direction of changing that aspect of our world. And so, the objective of an inventory is to take stock of our thoughts and feelings with total honesty, with a new kind of honesty, searching out the flaws that have retarded our growth and reverse the situation by using and building positive character traits. If we wish to be transformed, if we wish to be changed, we must be changed from something to something else. And so I must have some ability to evaluate what it is that I'm changing from and to have some knowledge of what I'm changing into. And a personal inventory will soon make clear why we experience the unsatisfactory conditions in our lives by revealing the inner negative mental and emotional states of mind that control our outer circumstances. If it is true that our world is a reflection of our inner state of mind, then we must know that we can never permanently change anything outside ourselves until there's an equivalent change that precedes the objective fact in the subjective, invisible world of our thought mind. And so, to know that it's not only possible, but necessary that at some point in our progress that we begin to look at ourselves without judgment and without condemnation, so that we can begin to grow again and change again. And I know in my own life, when this great truth was revealed to me a number of years ago, at first it was a frightening, threatening thing, and then suddenly it dawned upon me that this was the doorway to the greatest freedom that I had ever known. I spent the early part of my life defending myself. And there was a statement that I had that I sometimes made in jest, but in my secret heart I believed it. That was, I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong. And if I was wrong, you were not going to find it out. As a matter of fact, I was not going to find it out either. If I was wrong, I was going to hide it from you. I didn't need to hide it from God because God didn't exist. And I was surely not going to become cognizant of it myself. I would put it behind me quickly. And I did. Except I could never put those things behind me because they were always there following me. As a matter of fact, they preceded me. Everywhere I went, the secret world of my mind preceded me and arranged new facts and circumstances that were constantly confronting me. In other words, wherever I went, I arrived before I got there. Are you following me? Begin by asking yourself the following questions. What are the major problems in my life? Major problems in my life? Well, most people are reluctant to admit that they have real problems. If they have real problems, it's not really their problem. The problem is that the person that they're married to, if they were not married to that person, or the problem is not that they are somewhat incompetent on the job, the problem is the company that they work for. You understand that, don't you? That the problems that I have are not really me. The problems that I have are around me. It is very difficult for us to see that our problems are reflections of ourselves, and so it is really impossible to begin to take a personal inventory until I am willing to become 100% responsible for my own life, for my own world, for my own behavior, for my own moods, and for my own attitudes. And the fulfillment of that responsibility is absolutely impossible without a system of self-evaluation, of self-examination, and the kind of self-examination in which there's no blame, there's no fault, but just looking to clearly see what are the things, what are the attitudes, what are the patterns in my life that keep repeating themselves. What is causing me the most pain, the most shame, the most anger, the most fear, the most regret? Am I properly handling all of my responsibilities? Am I having repeated failure in certain life experiences, for example, relationships or career or finances and so forth? And who do I blame for all the things that have gone wrong? I had a long list of people that I blamed, but my name was not on the list. I promise you. I might have signed my name at the bottom, but that was only a statement that this was the list of the people that I would attest to who caused me my difficulties in life, and I was not one of those persons. Well, I found out that it really was not that way at all. The beginning of my time of self-examination was a time of great exploration and of excitement in ways that I cannot begin to describe to you. I can only report to you that those of us who are willing to be changed, and even to the point of letting our minds examine who and what we are, you're in for just a grand and glorious flight into inner space and outer space. When taking your own inventory, it's important to remember that you're taking your own inventory and not that of other persons whom you're involved with in life, although at times and in certain situations your experience and their experience overlap. But you have become 100% responsible for your own state of being. Let's see for a moment how this might work in a given situation. And in your image book, in the instructional section at the back that deals with masterminding and image books, and in this instance with inventory, there's a hypothetical example that's used, and I'll share it with you. A brief description of what happened and with whom. And this person is taking an inventory. My brother-in-law purchased a new car. Simple thing. Brought it over to the house with great eagerness to show it to me and described what a wonderful deal he had on this marvelous automobile. And I told him he got a bad deal, that I could have done better, much better for him if he had seen me first. My feelings and emotions following that experience. I felt guilty about lying because I could not have gotten him a better deal. He really got a good deal, and I knew he had a good deal, but I just could not bear having that sucker bring that car over to my house, because the character defects that this reveals to me are my jealousy, envy, and self-pity, and the tendency that I have to rationalize always my own position and to put myself, constantly to put myself in a better light than the people that I deal with. I can see that now, this person is saying. Another hypothetical situation. My mother is very critical about how I handle my children. And how do I feel? I feel angry. I feel futile, hopeless. The character defects that are shown resentment. False pride, again the tendency to rationalize. And one more time I'm seeing in me the low self-esteem that I have. And upon strict examination, I discovered that my mother really is right, that I don't know how to handle my children. I'm not handling my children at all. I didn't want to see that. Because if I saw that my children, these small kids, are already in charge of not only their lives but of mine, I just don't think that I could bear it. But now that I see it in this new light, it's quite possible that I'll be able to do something about it. Couldn't see these things before. I said to you a few minutes ago that Napoleon Hill had discovered in this century that the principles of success were definable, that they could be categorized and have been categorized, and that they could be taught and learned and practiced in ways that would bring about dramatic changes in a person's own beingness and in their experience on this planet. That's dramatic. But do you know that 2,000 years ago, the greatest teacher of them all said the same thing and taught a system of success that was categorized, well-defined and outlined, and that was taught, and he said that anyone who would learn the system, who would follow, and who would practice the system could have anything that they could envision, anything that their hearts could bring up into the reflective, creative imagery system of their mind. No exception. Jesus said, whatsoever things that you can believe in, that you can imagine, whatever they happen to be, and can see them as already accomplished in your life, knowing that they come through you, not from you, from a power greater than yourself, these things you can experience, providing that some other conditions are taken into consideration. And one of those conditions is forgiveness, and we'll get into that briefly in just a few minutes. But listen to what he said. Listen, all of you. Love your enemies. Love your enemies? Love your enemies? Who? That's not normal to love your enemies. And that's what he said. That's not normal. If you want to live an extraordinary life, then the first thing that you have to do is to begin to love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for the happiness of those who curse you. Implore God's blessing on those who hurt you. Try to show as much compassion as your Father does. Never criticize or condemn. Why? It will come back on you. Whatever you send out will come back upon you, but it'll come back multiplied, expanded. And then he went on to say, and see if this has anything to do with one's own personal inventory. And why quibble about the speck in someone else's eye is little fault when a board is in your own? Why be so upset constantly with what other persons are doing when you don't even see the things that you are doing, when you cannot see yourself or your responses or your reactions at all? How can you think of saying to him, brother, let me help you get that speck out of your eye, when you can't see past the board that's in yours? Hypocrite, and by hypocrite he meant someone who does not really act out what they believe. First get rid of the board, and then perhaps you can see well enough to deal with his speck. In other words, he's saying, stop being concerned about other people and dealing with them and reacting to them and putting them in positions of responsibility in your own life. Begin to see yourself, examine yourself, observe yourself. And in time, if you do so, you will come to understand other persons, and you will see that they've been doing the best they possibly can. And then you'll be ready to take the greatest step of all, which is to forgive them, to release them, to absolve them in your own mind for whatever responsibilities that you have placed upon them or blamed them for. In that moment, you will become a new creature, a new creation, a new kind of person, thinking from and feeling from a completely new belief system from which all things in your life will be different. Remember in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. In other words, our faults are forgiven as we, to the extent and in the manner that we forgive all other persons, that we live in a spiritual universe, that it is alive and responsive to each one of us. And only by beginning to think and feel and to see things in new ways and with new eyes can we be changed. And he said, those who come and listen and obey me are like the man who builds a house on a strong foundation and laid upon the underlying rock. When the floodwaters rise and break against the house, it stands firm, for it is strongly built. And this is a metaphor. He's not talking about being in the home construction business. He's talking about building a new mind state that will withstand the floods and the storms when they come. You believe the floods will come? You better believe that they will. You and I, who've been around these ideas for a period of time, and we've heard them, and we have been practicing them. And incidentally, let me point out to us that when any one of us comes into a group of people like this who are caught up in the practicing of universal principles, it is the most exciting thing that can happen to us, because we see people who are turned on, who are speaking in a new language and who are expressing themselves in new and exciting ways, people who love their lives and don't hesitate to let you know about it, and they like their mornings and their afternoons and their evenings, and they even love their problems, and will tell you that they love their problems and that they learn more from their problems frequently than they do from their successes. And you never heard any language like this down at the bar, I'll tell you, but they don't talk like that down there, because those folks don't have any problems. But once we're in here, we're carried along for a time by the enthusiasm of the crowd. It's like getting caught in a rush of people who are going down to the corner somewhere, and you don't know where they're going, but you kind of ride along with them, and there's a lot of excitement, and you're just pulled along. And then one day, if you don't become a part of the crowd, you fall to the wayside. It becomes very boring. And so, unless you and I become willing to grow, to be changed, in time we will leave this group, whatever or wherever that group happens to be. If we don't begin to practice these ideas in our lives, if we don't build a new state of mind, in time the storms will come. You understand what the storms are, don't you? And I'm not talking about the weather report or the fact that it's going to snow next week. I'm talking about that in our ordinary, normal lives, things will happen to us that will diminish us and will depress us and will anger us just like they have in the past. But if we have built the state of mind, that can happen. And it does not matter what takes place. We will understand it. We'll be strong enough to rise above it. Nothing will be able to diminish us or to depress us. Isn't that exciting? It was to me when I first discovered this. But you mean it's possible for me, Jack Boland, to live my life in such a way that I can be the same person all day long, every day? I can wake up happy, and I can take charge of my day, and if I fall short in any moment of it, I can stop and start all over again, so that in the course of that day I do not have to become depressed or remain depressed or angry or resentful, that I can always be filled with hope and with excitement, that I can always enjoy my life on a continuing basis. Do you believe that's possible for a person? I didn't know it was possible until one day I came to know that it was possible. I had an experience that revealed to me that this was not only possible, but that this is the life that all of us are going for. But you have to have a system. And that's what we're talking about in this transforming system. To be able to reverse our negative reactions and emotions and to release the past, not only our own past, but to then begin to forgive other persons. And the word forgive simply means to give up. To give up the judgment and the blaming that we have laid on other persons. This may be the most difficult of all of the spiritual responsibilities that we have. But again, it's one of the most exciting. And Jesus pointed out to us again and again, and not only did he do it, but most of the other mystics and prophets of the past and modern philosophers and And ordinary people just like you and me report the same fact that you and I will not grow beyond where we are at any given moment until we forgive all other persons. If there's anyone that we're still blaming or judging or accusing of something or reacting to, or that we have not forgiven, no matter what they did to us, when they did it, and no matter how right we are about them. You see, one of our problems is that we're right about those suckers. We know who they were and what they did. And sometimes the things that they did to us were dastardly, to say the least. But we have to forgive them. For them, no. For us. And if you are stuck where you are, for any reason, if your life is not unfolding, if you have lost your joy, if your prayers are not being answered, or if your goals are not being achieved, stop right where you are and see who it is that you have not forgiven. Whether it be an individual or a group or a class of people or the company that you work for or IRS for auditing you. Forgive them. And watch what happens inside your own mind and in your own world. Miracles will begin to happen to you again. And I've gone into this principle in other sections of the transforming system, so I won't belabor it, except it's very important that I think bring it to our attention one more time. Let's take another example type of situation so that we might see how it might be necessary to take an inventory. The example is I lost my job today. They pink slip me. If I'm an executive, I would not say it in exactly that way, but they relieved me of my responsibilities. After all I've done for that company. You know, I carry them through the hard time. Well, suppose you don't work for an organization. Suppose that you are, maybe a spouse, a homemaker. And so you lost your job in a different way. You found out this morning that he, your spouse, that guy that you put through college, only one of you could go, and you've known him since you were in grade school, and you were high school sweethearts, and you worked your fingers to the bone to help him get his education. And recently you suspected that he was playing little games with that new secretary, and this morning he said, "That's right, sweetheart. You've just lost your place in my life." The old way of reacting would be the idea, I can't cope with this. This is too much for me. This is bad. This is terrible. It is not my fault. The first reaction is, it is really not my fault. The idea is that something very unjust is happening to me. And the feelings, anger, worry, anxiety, a sense of hopelessness, and of course blaming others. It's always important. The first thing that we do is to blame other persons. And the action that one takes in the old system of thinking, the normal system of thinking, the first thing you want to do is to get even with them. And if not literally, then in ways, in sly ways, like accusing them of being responsible. Saying all manner of things to anyone who will listen. And explaining very carefully why this was not your fault at all. You had nothing whatsoever to do with it. Do you understand? It is not really my fault. Spending time thinking about how awful the situation is and developing certain attitudes, even a manner of speaking and the tone of the voice that describes how bad it is, and imaging the very worst. Seeing and feeling the very worst things that are going to happen, and neglecting other responsibilities, and certainly being difficult to live with. Just lose all control over your life and over your emotional responses. That's pretty normal, isn't it, under those circumstances? And anyone can understand how that can happen. Well, the new way of responding would be like this. Now, this is really a new way. The idea of, if I lost my job, or the spouse, apocatastasis. There must be something wonderful back of this. You mean it's possible that I can develop a way of thinking so that it doesn't matter what's happening, my immediate or almost immediate response is to begin to look for the good There must be a pony in here somewhere. I can tell. And also to know that I can cope with anything. In this first moment of shock, I may not be coping too well, but give me just a moment. Let me catch my second breath. Wait just a second. Let me dry these tears that are flowing down my cheeks, and I will dry them. And yes, this sense of loss is there, and it is sharp, and it's okay. I am not blaming anyone else, and these tears are not of misery. They're just a part of the shock that's happening to me. And something good is happening, and I know that. And the feelings are of being comfortable. I admit that I have seen this coming for a long time, but I had not acknowledged it until now. I know that I can cope with it. Yes, it's been happening. I'm not really surprised. And I know that while all of the fault might not be mine, the responsibility is mine. I am responsible for my own life. I will blame no other person. And I believe that it's time for a change to take place in my world. So something wonderful is about to happen. It's good here. And the first thing that I want to do is to forgive all other persons and keep that idea firmly planted in my own mind. They have done the very best they could under the circumstances that existed in them and for me. And actions that I will take, well, I'll get my resume up to date. If I've worked for this company as long as I have, then my resume is out of date, and if my work was in that marriage, I probably don't have a resume, and I'm not prepared. At least I didn't think I was prepared to go out into the world. So I'm going to get my resume up to date, and I'll get it into the right hands, and then I'll make a list of all possible options and choices. With excitement, I'm going to describe to myself, calling upon the mastermind, infinite intelligence, to reveal to me the different possible choices and options that I have, and I will write them down, even those that appear to have no validity or no possibility. And of course, I'll make sure that I've made a clean break from my present job, and with those persons I will go to them and make sure that they know, that they understand how I feel, that I do not blame them, and that I am truly grateful for this relationship that we've had in business, or this relationship, this personal relationship that I've had with this person. I will tell them how I really feel in my heart, because I want them to be comfortable and to know that I am comfortable, so that this time of parting will be a sweet time that we will all look back upon. And action that I will take will be also to spend time in prayer and meditation, visualizing the best, seeing my life unfolding in a manner that would be satisfactory and pleasing and exciting. This is a time for a clean break from the past and even from the present. And I'm also going to spend a great deal of time with my mastermind partners and being totally honest with them about how I feel and helping and asking them to reinforce my state of mind and to believe with me and to believe in me. And I will also spend as much time as possible with other up people, such as the people in this church, in this group. It's very important. Very important that at this time in my life that I stay in motion, in action, working toward and looking toward and reaching forward for the good that is in front of me, and not looking back upon the past except to call it good. But in those moments when my ego tries to drag me back and to get me attached, to cause me to be afraid or to blame, then I will do whatever it is that's necessary at that moment to separate myself from those negative emotions. And I will go into action. Whole new attitude, isn't it? But in this kind of new response, you see, I will be able to see and to understand more things about myself than I could ever possibly learn from sitting in the lotus position. How do you learn about yourself? In your daily life. That's how you learn. That's where you see yourself. You can observe yourself in action, in your responses, in traffic, whether it be on the freeway or in the exchange, the conversations with other persons, or those silent responses that no one else sees and that you have not seen within your own mind. That's how you see. And once you begin to see yourself, you will also begin to see things more clearly in your immediate world around you. Do you know that in the modern world, as intellectually brilliant as we sometimes believe ourselves to be, that the last people on the block in the neighborhood who know that their children are into dope are the parents? You know that? The last person to know that that 14-year-old girl is already a practicing alcoholic and is pregnant are her parents. Did you know that? Time and time and time again, and that's because we do not see ourselves. How can we see the people in our immediate world? That we cannot achieve our destiny until we can begin to look with new eyes and open minds. And when we are willing to look, it is astonishing how infinite intelligence begins to reveal to us incredible, wonderful aspects of both our ego self, our negative self, and of that spiritual self that is our true reality. The part of us that cannot see itself is the ego. It does not want to die. The part of us that is afraid does not want us to become aware of fear. It wants us to be focused on the thing that has caused us, we think, to be afraid. And so fear is always pointing to the things that it fears. And an inventory means that you begin to look, at the mind that is afraid, to begin to see the response and the mechanism that's back of the response. Anger never wants us to see that we are angry or to admit it or to see how terrible, how debilitating it is, how destructive it is to us and to the people around us. Anger wants to justify itself. It wants to be able to see how right it is. And it can prove how right it is, because it is right. It always selects things that normal, ordinary people are angry about. So it can justify. And you and I, as spiritual beings, can no longer justify those actions. Agamemnon, in his book, The Greatest Miracle in the World, said, I have been given eyes to see and a mind to think, and I now know a great secret of life, for I perceive at least that all my problems, discouragements, and heartaches are in truth great opportunities in disguise. Only the mind that has begun to take an inventory to see the world in a new way can see that problems are not really problems, but they're great opportunities in disguise, and can begin to react to those problems with selected responses. Not reactions, but with selected responses. I can choose how I will respond. I can respond to any situation the way that I choose. And I can decide that I'm going to enjoy this experience, whatever it happens to be. And I can enjoy it. And the rest of the world can think that I am mad. But it's the only sanity that really exists. I will no longer be fooled by the garments they wear, for mine eyes are open. I will look beyond the cloth, and I will not be deceived. And I will no longer let myself deceive myself for any appreciable period of time. I will observe myself. And I will not only use my own eyes, but I will use the eyes of those persons who are the closest to me. And I will listen to my critics and not criticize them in return. You see what merit there might be in what they say. Now we will remember the things that have been said to me over a long period of time, because perhaps there's some truth in those things when it has been said that I am not reasonable and that I never, ever say loving things or compliment other persons. Could that be true? Could it be that I am not easy to communicate with? And if so, why is this so? And when is it so? And is it true that I never really compliment anyone or tell them how wonderful and kind and that they are? How could this be? When it was I who, in my young life, went through my days looking for someone who could put their arms around me and see the good that is in me. And never having found such a person, I in time became like what I did not wish to be. Now I will see it and I will change it. I will no longer be fooled by the garments, by the mask that my mind has wrapped around itself. It is possible for a person who has begun to observe themselves to, in the midst of any experience that's happening, even including and especially a life-threatening experience. Choose your responses. Or even and including an ego-threatening experience. To catch yourself and to react almost immediately in new ways. You heard me say that I'm a former world-class angry person. It's true. There's a time in my life when I lost my temper more times before 9 o'clock than most people do all year, and I really lost it. I mean, I just turned it loose, and I thought that was something to be quite proud of. And when I decided that I wanted to be changed, I had to look at that to see how bad it was, how destructive. But seeing it did not of itself change it very much. It made me aware that something needed to be changed. But I had to choose other reactions, and so then on that particular day, which I rose, found myself reacting angrily. An angry person always finds something to be angry about. Have you noticed that? And if you can't find it, you'll invent it, and you won't wait very long to invent it. And I would find myself losing my temper, but because I was observing myself, I would be able to catch it, not immediately, but within moments or minutes, and I would force myself to pull it back down in time to change it. And then with practice in time, I would catch it as I lost it, and it was still there, but I could cut it off, not suppress it or deny that it existed. And then in time, I could see it coming and catch it just before it happened. And then in time, I could see it coming, and it did not arrive. And then in time, it did not come at all. It does not matter what our negative emotional responses are in life. We can change them, whether they be anger or fear. We can substitute for them that which is the opposite, that which is the complement. We can take our self-destructive inner behavior and change it to a new kind of thinking and feeling that guarantees that we will experience the lives that we have been destined to experience. But this glorious, important assignment of observing ourselves is one that we will never, ever reach the point of no longer needing to practice. It just becomes more exciting. The passage of time, as we become more accomplished and more adept, being able to observe and to watch. And in time, in the middle of a conversation, you can catch a wrong attitude and correct it even as you speak. And to do it almost unconsciously, you're conscious of what you were almost getting into inside yourself. In time, you can correct a behavioral mechanism even as it is happening, and so that it does not happen. And you can do it in the midst of a talk with another person or before 1,000 people. You can. Dr. Norman Vincent Peale said, "It is indeed a fact that the person who thinks with positive self-reliance and optimism does magnetize his condition and release his power to attain his goal. And to you, my friends, I say to you, expect the best, because you are the best. You are a reflection of perfection. All that God is reflected in your glorious life. And we're here upon this planet to let that light of beauty shine from us. And when Paul said that he saw through a cloud darkly, it meant that he saw through those incorrect perceptions that in time will clear away. God bless you in your unfolding.
This concludes the final tape in the series, The Transforming System, by Jack Boland. Jack has spoken on many other topics relating to self-improvement, including self-image, masterminding, and goal achieving. For a complete list of albums available, write to Mastermind Publishing Company, Post Office Box 1830, Warren, Michigan 48090.